Hi everyone, I'm back again, and today we've got a very interesting film to talk about. It's Hereditary. So we're going to do our usual thing, which is I'm going to recommend whether you see it or not, just a little bit more complicated than usual, and then I'll take you through the themes of the film, and then we'll get into spoilers. And wow, lots to talk about in spoilers. I already have talked to a couple of people who I had to explain actually what's happening in this film. So I'll cover that all later. Now, should you see this film? Well, I love this film, and I actually think it's a really, really good film, and has to be seen in the cinema because it's 2 hours plus, and it's a slow burn. Now the problem is, I'm seeing it got a lot of vibe out of Sundance, and a lot of people were thinking this was the next big thing in horror, and it is incredibly good, but it is what I call art house horror. So this would be my test. If you liked films like Get Out, probably more similar is The Witch, which is just this film which is just unnerving for a long time before big things happen. This is very similar to that. This could have had no supernatural elements in it at all, and you just would have found it a disturbing family drama. But then it ratchets up. So I think if you have your expectations aligned correctly, you'll really enjoy this film. And I do think you should see it in a cinema, because I think if you were watching it at home, because it can, what it does is it's trying to make you uncomfortable. And so if you're watching at home, you might just get up and take a break, make a cup of tea or something. That's not the way to watch this. So depending on where you are, if you liked it and you like jump scares, this isn't that kind of horror film. As I said, if you're into the slow burn, and when you put it together, it's really disturbing. Okay, I'll be back in a second. Okay, so this film is incredibly a debut film, and I'm going to look at the name Ari Aster. I've heard him interviewed. He's a young kid. He's like 20 odd. And you can't have seen any other films he's done because this is his first feature-length film. He's done about 7 short films. I haven't seen any of them. Wow, what an assured debut. And whether you think the film's good or bad, he really knows what kind of shot he wants to make. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more. But one of the themes of the film is that we are all, dolls, playthings of fate. And in this film, they're actually made extant in that there is some possession in the film, or you think, you're not sure at certain points. But the main job of the mother is she's an artist, and she recreates these kind of domestic dioramas. And the film opens with this shot in which your beautiful tracking shot into the diorama, which then becomes reality. And, you know, it's pretty clear it's making the subtext text, in that it is saying that is what we all go through, and how much control do we actually have of our lives, especially that domestic situation where you can't pick your family, and it just sometimes seems like if this domino falls, this domino will fall. And we've all seen, you know, the heartache that that can bring out. So for him to write this and direct it at such a young age, I listened to an interview with Toni Collette, and we'll talk about the cast in a second. And she said, well, she was just so surprised because he didn't have storyboards, but he knew exactly what he wanted to do. And 90% of the film is set in this beautiful kind of old wooden house. There's just so much wood, and it's got this real depth to it, solidity, and it becomes a character because you really get to know the geography of that house, and the way that the characters kind of interact within the house and where they create space. and he lights it perfectly. I can't remember the cinematographer's name, but between them, they've done a great job. Now, let's get to the cast, because if you're going to do a debut film, of course, you would have Toni Collette as the mother, Anne. Then you'd have Gabriel Byrne as the dad. You have a supporting cast role by the incredible Anne Dowd, who, if you don't recognize the name, she was fantastic in, and is fantastic so far in Handmaid's Tale. She was also in Justified, and you see her every now and then. As soon as you see her, you go, wow, the quality just went up. So they're the adults, for want of a better word, in the film, and they are great. I mean, Toni Collette especially. Yet, they are outshone in two very different ways by the children in the cast. Now, the young girl who plays Charlie, I had never seen her before. I looked it up. This is her first film, but she's been on Broadway for a long time. And her name is Millie Shapiro. Now, Millie Shapiro I've seen now pictures of her out of the film context, and she's a nice looking girl, but it's a very distinctive look. Like, I mean, it's not a typical, actresses, they often have that typical kind of beauty. She has gorgeous eyes, but it's a very distinct look. And then in the film, they do her no favors at all. And she is very unnerving in her performance of playing someone off center. So she seems totally normal in most of the context, but there's something just not right there. And I think she is incredible. It's just pure charisma's not the right word, but whenever she's on the screen, you are obsessed with looking at her and the way that she looks at the world. Maybe even much more difficult, because he just has to carry it on his own as a teenager, is Alex Wolff. Now, Alex Wolff, I did recognize him, and he was in Patriots Day. He was one of the two brothers. And he has to do an incredible amount of work in this film. Because, as I said, it could just be like ordinary people for 2018, without any supernatural element, or is it supernatural, mental illness? There's a lot of things working on here, and he has to do a lot of the heavy lifting to make the other people shine in their roles. And over the extent of the film, just amazing. Really, really great stuff. So this film, as I've said before at the beginning, slow burn, full of dread. I mean, some of the shots, you're just not sure what's going on. You're not sure if it's an unreliable narrator or a POV, or is this real? And as you start to put the pieces together, wow, you just do not feel that great. Now, I'm going to go to spoilers because I don't want to ruin anything, and really it's hard to talk about this film without talking about what is the actual context of what's happening. So I'll be back in a second. Okay, so now we're in spoilers. So please, I guess this is a weird one. You've either seen the film, and now we can discuss it, and I'm going to explain the ending because, as I said, a lot of people are confused by the ending, or you kind of decided you're never going to see it, but you're still curious as to what people are talking about. And this will be good for you, actually, because I'll explain everything. But before we get that, let's talk about the film now, now that I can speak plainly. So by the end of the film, we realize that the title is actually referring to this hereditary bloodline in which Ellen, the grandmother, the matriarch of the family, you see her in the first scene, she's passed away. Kind of seems like she passed away maybe without any awareness of what was about to happen. They say she has dementia, but you see that she has a pendant on, and Annie, Toni Collette wears a pendant at the funeral, and she even says, "Wow, I'm so surprised by there's so many people here." Now you realise later on that Ellen was head of a coven of devil worshippers, and that she has been actively working against her family to bring back a demon, a devil, one of the lords of hell, named Paimon. And to do that, she needed to create a vessel for him, and he prefers, so they say, a male vessel. And so when you look back at the history of the family, the men have slowly been whittled away, and in fact all the men either die or are possessed in this film. And the whole plan was that Charlie should become Paimon, but that eventually they would need a male body, and that ends up being Peter, the eldest boy. So once you start thinking about that, it is really a horrible, dreadful thing, because that means that that grandmother was actively killing and driving pretty much insane her whole family for 3 generations. It also means that Charlie, who I said before, an incredible performance, was possessed from almost a baby. And they talk about that and allude that the grandmother came back for the second child and actually helped feed it, which is kind of, as soon as it kind of just goes very quickly that she helped feed the baby, but this just makes no sense. But obviously something happened at that, and she has been a vessel for Paimon, and that's why Charlie is off-world, but also she has this thing about cutting heads off and all this weirdness, and it's because we now know by the end of the film that the cutting the head off is symbolic of King Paimon taking over. Now Paimon is if you're not into this stuff, I'm a voracious reader, and every teenager or goes through this history and go, oh well, I'd like to know more about witchcraft or something like that, and because it's just so crazy. And there's a book called The Lesser Key of Solomon. Now I had a look at that a long time ago, and there's numerous books of demonology which date from the Middle Ages, but The Lesser Key of Solomon is really quite famous, and Paimon is in that. So the director writer has kind of done enough research, because that pendant is real. That is really from the work of Solomon. So he just puts enough in that you go, wow, it kind of reeks of madness / reality. It's really, I describe this film as dreadful, not in the way we use the word dreadful now, bad, but full of dread. You all the way along the film go, something is off here. And even though I picked up certain parts of it, like there's a part when Joan Ann Dowd comes in, and as soon as she comes in, I pick her as working for the other side. I wasn't completely sure how it all would work, but I knew straight away. And I think sometimes that's just how stories work. But what happens by the end, which is where people do get a little bit confused, is Charlie, who's been possessed by Paimon all these years, they want a male vessel, and Ellen from the grave has controlled events so that when Charlie gets killed, that what we will do now, the coven, is have to go after the family to take possession of Peter. And that is the ending, in which you think for a long time that Annie, Toni Collette, is involved, and then you realise, no, she's just, as like everyone else in the dollhouse, she's just possessed. And that's when you get the horrible scene at the end where she's completely possessed by Paimon or an affiliate devil, and is able then to spider walk around the house, and eventually at the end you see Ellen, head cut off, Annie, head cut off, and on top of the statue of Paimon is Charlie's head. It's hard to recognize because it's all kind of horrible. And then what has happened is Peter, by jumping out the window to escape all the witches, knocks himself out, and Paimon / Charlie possesses him, floats up into the coven, and they're all worshipping him as a king, but they refer to him as Charlie. So think about this. That means Peter, a sliver of Peter is still in there. And he knows his whole family worked against him to allow Charlie / Paimon to possess him. He's looking around, there's bodies everywhere. It's absolutely horrible, and he is trapped there for who knows how long. It's a real full burn of a film. I just want to mention what I think, though, is the best scene, and it shows such confidence from Ari Aster as a young director to make this decision. And that is, early on, as we know, it's horrible. The boy, Peter, is driving back. His sister is having an anaphylactic reaction to nuts, and she can't breathe. So she puts her head out the window to get air, and he sees a body. Now, I'd love to see this again and just see if there's a head on that body, because you kind of think that they're, at this point, the coven might be wanting Charlie dead so that they can get the spirit and put it into Peter. I'm not quite sure if it just happens and then they react, or they plan this, but it is kind of weird that there's a body there. He reacts, and I can tell you what, there was no like screams or anything in the theater. You could have heard a pin drop. Everyone was, including me, I was just breathing. You know, when you're doing that open mouth bit, you go, that's a kid that just got decapitated, and you're really in shock. But then this is filmmaking, and this is confidence. Peter pulls the car over. You're seeing this POV from behind him sometimes. From in front, but he's looking at the rearview mirror. And he glances back. He knows what just happened. He's pretty sure. He glances back. He knows. He doesn't panic. He doesn't do a big reaction. He's in complete shock. His brain is starting to lock down. He knows his sister is dead. He's not making a phone call for an ambulance. He's not racing away. He just stares straight ahead, and he can't put it together. He can't cope. And this tear comes unbidden down out of his eye, but it's not from sobbing. The body's reacting, but the brain can't. He's locked in. He goes to start, then he goes into automatic mode, and he just drives home. And this is the incredible thing. He gets up, he goes to bed because it's too big. He doesn't know what to do. And the next morning, you just hear screams. Now, it takes you a little while to work that out. What has just occurred, and he doesn't show it. It's too horrible to show. You couldn't show it. I don't even know how you would do it. But your brain will then fill in that picture. And what it is Annie, Toni Collette, finding the headless body of her daughter. And the scream of anguish just cuts through you. I mean, the film gets much worse when you put all the whole puzzle together, but that scene to really end the first act, this guy really knows what he's doing. He should have a great career. I really enjoyed Hereditary. I don't think it's for everyone. It's not a film you'd kind of recommend. But if you are that kind of person, your concentration on watching what is happening, because there's a lot happening in the edges, you will be rewarded. That's it for today. A million films coming. Too many films. Ocean's 8, Jurassic Park's coming, and Incredibles 2. I watched Incredibles last night in preparation, which is my favorite Pixar of all time. So if you like what I'm doing, hit the bell so you always know what I'm doing, share, comment. I'd love to hear if you disagree or agree. I love a good debate. And I'm on Twitter at Guru Eden, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.